Hi, how you going? So every now and then, especially when I get to the bottom half of the internet, having forgotten the rule to never read the comments, I think of my favorite internet comment. Despite quite a long time searching through literally hundreds of posts with many thousands of comments, I couldn't find the original comment. It's lost to the mists of time, probably entirely justifiably deleted by an admin. But I did recreate it on a fake Facebook comment generator. This is exactly how the comment appears in my memory. Her name, of course, wasn't Karen, but the words are an accurate representation of my memory. So you're going to need some context. This comment was made on a post announcing the winner of a weekly photography competition on Facebook, run by a national camera store chain in Australia. Each week they'd set a topic, we'd all enter our best photos, and then on Friday the winners would be announced and 10 runners-up would be collected into a Facebook gallery. There were usually hundreds of entries, ranging from the truly superb to the truly awful. And most of the following happened in the early days of the competition, which is probably 10 to 15 years ago. Every Friday, the winner would be announced to a mild fanfare. The shots were usually clearly skilled, but also sometimes clearly amateur. And I mean that in a good way. It showed that less technically skilled photographers with a good idea and a good photo could place or even win these competitions. I usually entered, but I never won. But I did make the top 10 list about 5 times, and I was really happy with that. I could see my shots were not as good as the winners, but I used the competition as a way to push myself and try and get better and take better photos, and also just an excuse to go out and use my cameras. Initially, the comments from Facebook users were positive. Congrats to the winners, nice shot, etc. But then at a certain point they turned. People started to show their true colours. It's not fair. They have a more expensive camera. They're a professional. They used Photoshop. Most of the comments seemed to boil down to one theme. The person who won is better at photography than me and submitted a photo that deserved to win more than I did, and therefore they don't deserve to win, which is fun and totally logical. This real comment I found perfectly exemplifies the sentiment. It shows that the person sees that the winners were amazing shots, but also claims that they don't deserve to win because they have a nice camera and can do some post-production, both of which are presented as unaffordable luxuries for an average person. If this comment's suggestions were taken up, I'm not even sure the logistics of how they would choose a winner. Any masterpieces are automatically rejected, and we somehow have to measure who loves taking photos with their camera more, but only if the camera doesn't cost too much. It's weird, and this was one of the nicer comments. The comments section on this little corner of the internet was a perfect microcosm of the larger internet. Bickering, insults, people not understanding things but commenting anyway, people feeling entitled to their opinion even though their opinion is objectively wrong, especially if it was wrong, and sometimes all of the above in a single comment. I engaged with the whingers one week. I'd made the top 10 with a photo taken on a quite reasonably priced 5-year-old point-and-shoot camera, so I pointed this out. I didn't use a DSLR, which was one of their marks of a professional, and I hadn't used Photoshop, which was another mark of either a professional or a cheater, depending on the commenter. But I'd instead tweaked the photo in Picasa, which was a free program at the time and was really simple to use. And overall, I was in no way professional, but my comments fell on deaf ears, as did those of others suggesting that the negative commenters may be mistaken or wrong. Because of the way the competition was set up on Facebook at the time, everyone's entries were in a publicly accessible album on their profile, which meant every time I saw one of these comments, it's not fair, I could click on that person, look up their photos, and see their entry. So, of course I did, and almost always it was badly framed snapshot. The lighting was bad, the framing was bad, the horizon was not lined up, and the photos didn't show any skill beyond clicking a button. I use the term snapshot to refer to people's photos who always complained for a reason. Snapshots are simple, a shot of a moment that someone wants to remember, with the skill of the photographer taking a backseat to the moment and to the subjects themselves. There's nothing wrong with snapshots. It's what the vast majority of photographs ever taken are. It's what most of my photos are. And snapshots serve their purpose, but that purpose isn't for entering national photography competitions against photos that people have spent time and skill composing, and from photographers who've spent years learning their art. A lot of the complaints were about shots being photoshopped. Any level of editing beyond submitting a photo straight from the camera was unacceptable to these commenters. And indeed, shots that used long exposure suffered the same complaints, regardless of whether or not they were then edited. So many complaints about Photoshop, none of them realizing that Photoshop can't save a bad photo. It can make it a bit better, but it can't make a bad photo amazing simply by running it through Photoshop. And in fact, when shooting in RAW, photos need to be edited to make them look like the actual scene anyway. But these people kept on complaining. There were also complaints that people winning a skill-based competition more than once wasn't fair, and that people with good cameras didn't deserve to win another camera over people that didn't have one. There were suggestions of a point-and-shoot versus DSLR category, but this wouldn't have stopped the complaining given that winners were regularly not taken on DSLRs. There were suggestions of an amateur versus a professional category, with no one able to adequately define who was and wasn't a professional. There were even suggestions that the entire thing be turned into a kind of raffle, so that people with no photography skills could fulfill their dream of winning a photography competition and get the camera prize that they truly felt would give them the chance to compete with people much more skilled than them. But interestingly, by their logic, this new camera they won for doing nothing would then immediately disqualify them from future competitions because they now had a good camera. It was a fascinating example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. That is, where a person's lack of knowledge and skill in a certain area causes them to overestimate their own competence. These people so lacked the basic knowledge of photography that they couldn't see that their photos weren't in the same league, and that the use of DSLRs and Photoshop, HDR, long exposures, and all those other photography techniques weren't cheating and were in fact genuine photography techniques. And that regardless, none of them would have won anyway. This wouldn't have changed the outcome. The reasons I loved all these comments so much are many. Firstly, the naivety and ignorance that was on display, not understanding photography enough to understand that they were wrong. Some people on the Photoshop's main page once even tried to argue against a post containing an Ansel Adams quote from arguably one of the best photographers of all time. The comments showed the lack of respect for other people. They were commented on the winner's photo, where the winner would see, implying that they didn't deserve their hard-earned win, immediately casting a shadow over what the photographer must have felt after they'd just been informed that they won something based on their skills and experience and creativity. These comments perfectly demonstrated that need people have these days to share their opinion on everything on the internet, and their unshakable belief that their opinion is valid purely because they hold it, and that others want to hear it, and that everyone would and should respect it just because everyone is entitled to their opinion. And all of this is regardless of their knowledge on the thing on which they have this opinion. There's just so much entitlement. These people felt like they should get their turn at winning a competition just because they'd entered, at the expense of people with much better entries than them. Like Usain Bolt should have slowed down to let the slower runners have their turn of winning the 100-metre sprint at the Olympics. It's tall poppy syndrome, something we're quite good at in Australia, that people who are better at something than these people deserve to be pushed down and shoved aside, and that the line for who was professional was pretty much anyone who was better than them, so they would always be at the top of the pile of those who were left after the talented undeserving were purged. But the comment that was my favourite out of the whole lot was Karen's, and the reason I think it's so amazing are multiple. It captures everything that's wrong with internet commenters today. Firstly, the comment that it is not fair, that competition should be a level playing field for people of all skills and abilities, that I should be able to win any competition despite actual skill levels. I'm never going to win a running race, but Karen thinks that I should be declared the winner regardless, or probably not me, probably more her. Next, the entitlement on display, that the rules are not fair as they mean that this person won't win, and that they deserve to win just because they exist, and they deserve it more than the person who actually won a skill-based competition, that they deserve this despite all the ignored evidence to the contrary. Thirdly, the need to add too much information while walking my dog. I don't care where she took her photos or her lack of time, and in fact, that this excuse of not enough time was somehow valid, like more time would make a difference. Next, the need to point out that she took the photo on her phone. This was about 15 years ago when phone cameras were not what they are now. They were capable of good photos, but only in the right hands, and were nothing compared to DSLRs of the time. There is the big assumption in all of this that someone who only takes photos on their phone while walking their dog is not going to have the time and equipment with them to perfectly compose a photo. A good photographer with a good eye and skills could take good photos while walking their dog, and those photos would blow this person's shots out of the water. There's also the assumption that it's somehow the camera shop's problem that this person didn't have enough time to properly enter the competition. Like Karen was somehow forced to enter the competition, And this is a competition that only takes one photo to enter, which is not a huge hurdle. And that the shop should write or rewrite the rules of the competition to mean that Karen can win, though I'm not even sure how this would have been possible. Karen thinks that everyone should have their turn at winning. Again, it was a skill-based competition. Interestingly, because there is such a level of ignorance of the skill differential between the winner and Karen, it also means that there's no way that Karen will ever get better at taking photos, and will therefore never actually have a chance of winning. If Karen thinks that the only reason she's not winning is because of the aforementioned reasons, time, dog, phone, general unfairness, then she's never going to actually address the shortcomings in her skills. Anyone better than her is dismissed as a time-rich professional, Photoshop-using, DSLR-wielding cheater. I think the biggest thing about this comment for me is the absolute lack of respect for other people. That the person who submitted the photo was probably an amazing shot didn't deserve to win because the dog walker deserved it more. And again, it was commented under the photo from the winner in what was probably a happy moment of triumph for them. This triumph, which was then negated a little bit by this ignorant, talentless idiot claiming that they didn't deserve it. It would be exactly this type of person who would complain that kids these days are soft because of participation trophies, all while expecting the world to give them prizes just for existing. The camera shop in question regularly stepped into the comments to try to calm down the protesters. They ran a poll and found out that less than 10% of the winners and finalists would consider themselves professionals, and that over half fit the category of enthusiast. They clarified the rules and pointed out that the things people were asking for would be difficult, if not impossible, to police. People felt a little bit heard, but without an undeserved win under their belt, they would never be happy with the results. They actually ended up stopping running the competition for a while to stop all this complaining. And when it came back, it was boring because everyone in the comments just said nice things about the photos. Or what probably happened was that the moderation stepped up and the negative comments were rightfully deleted. I think this whole thing demonstrates some of the reasons for the major problems in the world today. People with no knowledge of things, who feel no need to improve their knowledge of said thing, shouting ignorant comments into the void of the internet and getting angry and doubling down when people point out that they're wrong. Holding on to the "I'm entitled to my opinion" defense when challenged on any of their toxic views, ignoring the fact that their opinion is objectively wrong. Never willing to change their mind or be swayed in any way by logic, evidence, or reality. Gee whiz indeed. I'm not sure how any of this will ever actually change, but it would be nice if people would be nice to each other, congratulate those who deserve it, and inform themselves before thinking about yelling at strangers on the internet. Or, better yet, change their outlook so the idea of yelling at strangers on the internet doesn't even occur to them. Or if they see something that someone's done better than them, congratulate them and use this as motivation and inspiration to get better themselves. On a happy note, I'll leave it here for this week and stop talking about idiots that you didn't even know existed until a few minutes ago. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm sure you'll all be infinitely more informed and nuanced than Karen. And I'll see you next week. Bye.